Welcome to the Reality Check. Psychosis is real, so is recovery podcast.
I'm Dr. Ashley Weiss. I'm a child adolescent psychiatrist.
And I'm Serena Chaudhry. I'm a clinical social worker.
And we are the co-founders of EPIC-NOLA, which is the Early Psychosis Intervention Clinic in New Orleans, and also the co-founders of CALM, Clear Answers to Louisiana Mental Health.
Welcome to Reality Check. This afternoon, we're here today with the sister of one of our EPIC-NOLA patients. And we're going to have a conversation about the impact of psychosis on siblings. It's something that we see play out on the daily, and we have a lot of people asking us questions about it, but we haven't heard a lot of conversation with siblings being broadcast or in the media. And so we thought we would do that today. So we'll go ahead and get started. If you'd like to just talk a little bit about how you, that your sort of entry into this world upon your brother's diagnosis and what that experience was like for you at the outset.
Yeah, sure. Hi. So the first thing I'll say is it wasn't like a black and white before and after. First of all, I think my brother isn't the first person, at least in terms of like mental health crises. I've definitely like either been around or heard about like close friends having mental health crises, not of like psychotic nature that I know of. So that was kind of like my context. And ironically, because I had had experience with friends that was not of a psychotic nature or whatnot, you know, and also in myself, like I've had my own mental health challenges, and, you know, it's really easy, like, to see somebody having a hard time and thinking it's something like it's only depression. And so I had seen my brother struggling for a long time before this, and maybe some of it was related. I don't even know. Maybe some of it was unrelated, but it was kind of like there were a couple times where one starts to think, wait, what he's saying doesn't make sense, or this is not just depression, or is, you know, different than, like, I don't know, bipolar. Like, I had a friend with bipolar before, so I knew like a little bit of what that kind of looked like, but, you know, from the outside. But, you know, the nature of this is like, you start thinking, oh, like, this seems like this doesn't make sense. And one can know that like psychosis and like things like schizophrenia they exist, but sometimes it's an other people problem. And so when it starts looking like that, you kind of don't want to jump to conclusions or whatnot. And so, I don't know. But I think my brother has been very deliberate with what he's told me. So I like don't even know what his diagnosis is, for instance. And like, I completely respect that. And he wants to, like, you know, keep different things of his life like separated into different buckets. But I knew it was clear, like, when he started getting treated by you all, it was clear that there was like a discrete change in how he was experiencing these things. And like the amount that he got better from when he was having a lot of trouble to when he was starting to really get over it was really remarkable. And I think that's when it kind of like clicked for me. I'm not going to say it's obviously not easy and such, and it's always extremely hard to see somebody you love struggling with anything. It's been harder on my other family, like my mother, and so sometimes I don't know how to help. I also don't live in the same city, and so I would see it only on occasion and hear about it from just like, you know, whatever my mother would tell me, which she didn't tell me everything, but, you know, a little bit. But I did see it on a few occasions, my brother like experiencing something that was probably psychosis. Like, but I think my temperament is one that like I like process things kind of slowly, and I'm kind of just like in the moment when things happen and then don't process them until later. And so things were tricky for a while.
Yeah.
You said something that I thought sounded familiar, and it's not necessarily something that happens all of a sudden. For many, reflecting on the experience of psychosis, there's a buildup. There's changes over time, and I think looking back, many people can see that. And I think I appreciate the fact that you too can look back on what has been a long journey and see that it wasn't just one day that something was different, that the changes were happening over time. And then the other thing I'll just highlight is you talked about not really knowing how to help at times. And again, that's something that I've heard from many siblings. And I think there is the underestimating of the presence of, right, a caring soul, someone who's able to just, like you said, be there in the moment and be present. And for everybody, right? A grounding presence, a calm presence in the moment of heightened emotion and or psychotic symptoms can be amazingly grounding. And so I think that is important to highlight as well.
Yeah, that's definitely something I learned was good. I don't live with my brother, but I try to visit and just be a normal, regular presence as much as I can. I can imagine that not all people have as much, slack in their life, but I had to do a little bit of weighing of priorities. And I'm like, oh, this is somebody who I love dearly and who I care about his well-being. And so if they're of course there's not a lot I can do to help, but when there is something just being there from whatever and however that is, sometimes not being there is actually more useful. I think sometimes he's I need privacy. So, anything I can do that does help is good.
Yeah, I think that and I hear from a lot of families, and I mean, just my own personal experience, we want to I think it's our human nature to want to do something different, do something to help. But then when you weigh that against your relationship with someone where it's your sibling, I might be that person's doctor, but I, as the doctor, need for the mother, for the brother, the sister, the people that are constant in their life to still be those roles and not go into this fix it role. And because it makes the person feel more singled out. Why is everyone acting, you make me go, I'm going to treatment, I'm going to see these people, I'm talking about all this stuff. When I come home, I just want to hang out and watch TV. I don't want, because that's the part of the relationship that is very grounding and makes people feel it's not about being supported. It's just that I'm continuing in this brother-sister thing. Yes, things have changed, but we can still just hang out and I don't have to be treated like a sick person. You mentioned the kind of the othering of schizophrenia in the world. And it's so unfortunate, but we have to be careful that our own interactions don't become that too, especially where you're supposed to be most comfortable, which is often at home, not always, but often.
Yeah. To a large extent, oneself is what defines what normal is for one, in addition to all the, of course, the societal stuff. And so the closer that something is to oneself, the more it has to be normal, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. When somebody close to you has either mental illness or psychosis or whatnot, or even I think this probably also applies to other diseases, there are lots I could name here. You realize that this is a type of thing that the brain can do. It exists for real in the world. And that kind of shifts your perspective a bit. I guess I don't know how to describe it.
It's not just in the movies. And you mentioned earlier, kind of before we started doing the podcast, we were just checking in about the kind of dramatic archetypes that exist out there that display psychosis, and it's it makes it feel further away.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, so for our clinical team, we're reading an older book about psychosis and schizophrenia. I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. And in reading it, I've been struck so significantly about how what we're reading in this book is the same as what's playing out in 2024 in our patients' lives. The disease is the disease, and the brain does this thing to protect the human, right? And these symptoms are defenses. And anyway, in the book, there's a lot of very, from my perspective, familiar comments made by families and siblings, and the pain, the isolation that families feel, the stigma that they experience when trying to manage and protect their family member who's struggling. And so I say that just to share that this is something that has happened, that will happen, and we're trying as best we can as family members, as caregivers, to support the people who are struggling with symptoms. So my question to you is, what are some of the tools, the approaches, what have you done that you have found particularly helpful for your brother and or your family?
Yeah. Well, let's see. I guess I could start first with I've definitely gone to therapy myself to work out, both me stuff, and then also where are the boundaries to draw, because normal wisdom about boundaries is, I don't think it always applies in specific, but I feel like I have to customize the understanding of boundaries to this situation to apply the concept without giving up something I care about. So there's that. Let's see. Just kind of having an open mind, I think, and having an open mind when my brother is doing well, but has his own quirks, just roll with it. When he was initially having mental crises and before he's being treated, having a hard time, because I wasn't the one trying to schedule psychiatry appointments or whatnot, it's hard to know how much to get involved or not get involved. And yeah, just being available, I guess, is really helpful, because there might be unexpected either logistical things or unexpected ways you can help. So just kind of being around. Yeah. Let's see. I did take a workshop a little while ago for caregivers, even though I'm not a caregiver myself. That was really helpful to empathize even more, and also understand when, at least for psychosis things, when my mother, who's his caretaker, he lives with my mother, when she takes a certain tack during conversations with him, I can go along with it, and I understand why she's taking the tack. I think she took this course to this workshop. And by the way, that's the University of Washington Spirit Lab, I think.
Yeah, the psychosis reach.
Yeah. Yes, that's it. And after I took it, I started I found that advice applicable to not just in my family, but in my professional life and friends. That's the other thing that kind of broke down the other construct for me. That course actually highlighted that these symptoms kind of exist on a little bit of a spectrum, and everybody experiences, maybe it has different underlying reasons, but I've certainly, when I stayed up all night in college, because, college students do that, I've certainly had a little sleep deprivation, hallucinations, and that kind of thing. So people experience these things on a spectrum. And I started realizing, when my friend confides in me that he doesn't know how to talk to his wife, she's being unreasonable or whatever, that's often, that has nothing to do with psychosis, but it's a lot of the advice in that workshop is similar to how you would approach that kind of situation, I think. I just find that interesting.
I think that's cool. And I think it's a good plug for the Psychosis Reach program for listeners. I think it's a great
Yeah.
resource and a tool that's applicable to siblings, caretakers who have people experiencing psychosis in their life, but tools that can be extrapolated.
Yeah.
Well, also that it's not, a lot of the things that we know, or we might like think that we know, there's no manual of like how to support people that you love or how to support people that you might not know. And that because sometimes like what psychosis might look like to someone or what they hear, they might not understand what's going on or understand what's going on in their mind, that it doesn't mean that you have to then like reinvent the wheel and create some complicated way of supporting them. It's like someone's anxious if someone fell and broke their leg, or if they complain of an upset stomach, you'd be like, how are we what can we do to like help you feel better? It's not something magical that comes along with it. And I would hope that that would take the burden off of like figuring it out, that it's really kind of getting back to the basics. And there are some highlights, of how to support people that are, best that are going through psychosis, but a lot of it's based on normal human supportive interaction.
Right. And being present, which is, I think, something you've highlighted. So I think, in wrapping up, I was curious or am curious what advice or words of wisdom you might offer to a sibling who has someone in their lives, a sibling, I don't know why I'm tripping on the word sibling, diagnosed with or experiencing the first episode of psychosis or diagnosed with a psychotic disorder. What advice might you give to someone?
Let's see. Well, first and foremost, they're still themselves. This is still the person you know, and that can be masked, but they haven't transformed. It's just masked. And with treatment, they absolutely can return to themselves. Like that was one of the most awesome things about my brother getting treated, that the old him started coming back, and that was awesome. So like, don't give up faith, I guess. The other thing is that it can last for a while. Yeah. And so that can fool you into thinking like it's permanent or something. Mm-hmm. You kind of have to be patient. And if something hits you really hard, it's going to pass. And when it passes, just like take a breath of fresh air or something. It'll pass, and it might happen again. This is like really bumpy, but don't lose faith that your loved one is still there and needs you. And maybe you need them. I have always benefited enormously from my relationship with my brother. And when he gets back to himself, that just goes on. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Have you ever struggled with like taking things personally? Like maybe if he's not well, or maybe saying things, like kind of being able to realize that's something like I see often. It's like, they said and did this at this moment, so now it means forever that that they think that, or that they're gonna do this again. And
this might be why when I said it wasn't, this isn't easy, but for me it's been a little easier because I don't live all the time with him, and because of our age difference, I was in college when he was in high school or whatnot, but there's a couple of times that kind of thing has stood out to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's a general heuristic for normal relationships. Like people say things in the heat of the moment that they don't mean. We all do that and say and do things. And sometimes, like I'm thinking of like marital relationships and, whatnot. Sometimes that kind of crosses over a line sometimes. And like, you have to know what that line is, but also realize that when there's literally like a disease behind this, that this is a really weird disease because it like messes with belief and intent and such.
Right.
So you have to recognize that he has in the past said something and then like dropped it the next day or something. And I'm thinking way back this was like when he was untreated and such. It's tricky. It's really tricky because you have to know where that line is. Another piece of advice is like learn about this and read more about people's experiences, because then you get a better sense for where that line is. Like I can tell when it's the equivalent of somebody just getting angry in an argument or something and saying something that I don't mean. Relationships would not be possible if everybody took those types of things personally all the time. It's hard. I don't know.
I think you highlighted and shared some really important pieces of advice or things that you've learned. And the reality is, right, the person that you love is still there. This is an illness. And I think you said it's just a mask at times, but to not lose faith in the reality that the person you love is still there. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing your journey.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And, appreciate always hearing, about your presence along the journey. And it does not go unnoticed how your family has formed a village and everybody, trying to work together and have a very brave and talented family.
Yeah, I respect my mom like a lot. Like wow. Like yeah. I'm glad that, I can help. And like it goes back to that, like not knowing how to help.
This is helping.
You can help. But like it's unintuitive because it's not the fixing things. And it's like, I'm a software developer. I did like science in college, and like I'm like a analytical like fix. And so it's been like I've had to like distinguish between the different worlds, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Right.
Until next time, thanks for taking the time to get your reality check. And remember, psychosis is real, so is recovery.
If you have enjoyed this episode or found it useful, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from and check out the website calmnola.org.